Hello and welcome back to Reddit Replies. Today's question: what's the worst thing you've heard pretending to be asleep? Story 1. I overheard my parents talking about sending my siblings and me to the streets while pretending to be asleep because I was playing with my Nintendo DS when I was supposed to be sleeping. I heard my parents planning their divorce. I spoiled the plot big time. Story 2. During my freshman year of college, my roommate was watching porn on his laptop with headphones on and going at it on his mattress like there was no tomorrow. Story 3. I overheard my father telling my mother that sometimes he just wanted to end it all with me. I was 5 years old at the time, and given that my dad was an alcoholic filled with rage, I believed him, living my entire childhood thinking he would take my life. Story 4. Listening to my brother talking in his sleep. It's sometimes funny and other times scary. Story 5. One night, when I was 16 and my little brother was 7, we decided to sleep in the same bed and have a late-night chat. Our mom came into the room, talking on the phone with our dad. He and I were under the sheets, trying hard not to burst into laughter and scare our mom. When she said, "Love, I have to hang up, I'm going to put the coin under Pepito's pillow," his face changed, and I had to console him all night, telling him why they told him the tooth fairy existed when it was actually our mom. In the end, he told our grandma, and now she gives him the coin in her hand. Story 6. When I was around 8 years old, I was supposed to be asleep, but I secretly went downstairs to get some milk or something. I overheard my mom talking to my brother about what a problem I was and how she hated me. She always preferred my brother. I quietly went back upstairs, cried myself to sleep while pretending to be asleep. Story 7. While pretending to be asleep, I overheard my parents saying that my cat was lying in the backyard, apparently poisoned. They didn't tell me anything the next day, and weeks went by before they finally told me that he had gone missing. I cried all night in my room. Story 8. When I used to share a bunk bed with my older brother, he fell from the top bunk while I pretended to be asleep on the bottom. I could only hear him say something to our dad and then go silent, trying not to wake me up while muttering more insults under his breath. Story 9. One day, while pretending to be asleep, I overheard my parents saying that having me was a huge mistake. It still hurts me to this day. Story 10. I used to pretend to be asleep when my parents were at home so that they wouldn't come and bother me for any reason. One of those times happened a couple of weeks ago. My mom tucked me in and started criticizing me, saying I'm not good at anything, my career is useless, I'll never find a job or have a future, and that I draw terribly. I study design and I want to pursue traditional illustration. As I was pretending, I stayed still for about 10 more minutes and then acted like I was waking up lazily. My mom was still there, but her attitude immediately changed to a loving one. To this day, she hasn't realized that I overheard her, and it really hurt me. Story 11. During my birthday party, which was a sleepover, we were having a great time. Around 6 a.m., I woke up but kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. I overheard two of my friends criticizing and laughing at me. I don't know why I didn't explode at that moment. I guess it was because I didn't have the strong character I have now, and I was also sleepy. Story 12. One time, I pretended to be asleep, and when my mom came into my room, she said, "I love you so much, I'm sure you can achieve anything you want." I swear I wanted to hug her, but I couldn't. I pretended to be asleep while hiding my phone and overheard a conversation in the background. My dad was saying, I don't want to see him anymore after he turns 18. He never does anything with his life. At that moment, I was 12. My mom said, he was the biggest mistake of my life. I broke down in tears. It was clear that my parents realized I was listening. 3 weeks later, my dad left and never came back. A month after that, my mom took her own life in front of me and my sister, saying, almost free. I currently live with my grandparents. I'm 16 and have a beautiful girlfriend who takes away my nightmares. She's the best thing that has happened to me in life. Story 13. When I was a child, I used to be afraid of monsters or something sneaking up on me while I slept. So, I always asked my dad to check on me before going to bed. It made me feel more comfortable. One night, I was still awake when I heard him coming up the stairs. And I wasn't supposed to be awake, so I knew I would get in trouble if he saw me. So, I pretended to be asleep. He came into my room and stared at me for a few seconds. Then, he approached my bed, lifted the blanket, farted underneath, turned around, and left. It has been at least 15 years, and I vividly remember that night. He denies it to this day, but I know what happened. Story 14. My dad and stepmom were having a foursome with a couple of their friends. We were at a summer house, and they did it in the living room. I felt so uncomfortable eating breakfast the next morning. Story 15. It was the last time my dad carried me to bed. I was about 10 years old. Now that I think about it, you never know when the last time things will happen, and you start to grow up. Story 16. Once, I overheard my ex-girlfriend sending an audio message saying she wanted to break up with me. At that moment, I felt so bad because we had an incredible trust and loved each other so much. So, I couldn't take it anymore and got out of bed, telling her that it was true. She told me it was a joke because she knew I was awake. I felt relieved. We laughed, and I went back to sleep, but we still ended up breaking up. Story 17. Most of the time, my dad's outbursts of madness at around 4 or 5 in the morning, shouting at God and grinding his teeth, don't bother me. You never get used to it. Story 18. I was 11 years old, and I remember my dad coming back from the hospital, having visited my grandfather. My mom asked him how he was, and my dad said, he passed away. I couldn't sleep that night, I was so shocked. Just a few days before that, my grandmother had told us to send him a letter so he could see it. I was lazy to do it until the day before, but then I said to myself, I'll do it tomorrow. I regret it so much now. Story 19. When I was waking up from anesthesia and could barely breathe, I heard someone say, I think we're losing her again. Story 20. I heard someone knock on my door, open it, and close it abruptly, but my family had gone on a trip and wouldn't return until the next day. Since then, I can't stand people knocking on my door. Story 21. I pretended to be asleep while there was a party at my house, and I overheard my mother saying that she preferred my younger brother over me. It's understandable since he's much younger, but the way she said it made it sound like she hated me. Story 22. My sister got drunk and I heard a noise, and she passed out. Two of her friends, my mom, and my dad were all shouting and telling each other to shut up because they didn't want to wake me up. They were all crying, thinking she was dead, and I couldn't tell my sister how happy I was that she didn't die. I now appreciate seeing her every week. Story 23. During my mother's 50th birthday, we arrived at my aunt's house, and I fell asleep for a while after an intense basketball game with my cousins. When I woke up, I overheard my sister saying that nobody likes me, and everyone else confirming it. The only ones who didn't say anything were my brother-in-law and my aunt. It didn't really affect me that much. I was the black sheep that everyone avoided, and what I heard only confirmed my thoughts. Story 24. I woke up with a friend and her husband arguing in the next room because she had caught him stroking my hair while I was asleep on the couch. It's not the worst, but it reminded me of the time I shared a hotel room with my grandpa, and he got up in the middle of the night to pee and said a prayer out loud for his deceased wife. It was tough for me because I hear my siblings talking badly about me daily. Story 25. I'm only 17, and my brothers already want me to leave the house because they know I'll likely inherit it, and they think I'll kick them out as soon as the papers are in my name. The funny thing is, they're both over 30 and still being supported by our parents. Story 26. Once, I overheard my parents talking about getting a divorce while pretending to be asleep. But what hurt the most was the sadness in my mother's voice. The next day, it was like nothing had happened, but unfortunately, they did end up getting divorced. Story 27. That my great-grandfather probably slept with his daughter, my great-aunt, and that was one of the reasons she never got married and was eccentric. My mom and aunt thought I was sleeping in the back seat during a road trip. I've never told anyone what I heard. Story 28. My mom said to her sister on the phone, "You're so lucky, God, I wish I never had kids. I really hate them." Thankfully, she's a loving mother. She was going through a tough time, and she didn't mean it seriously. Story 29. Once, I overheard my mom talking on the phone with my dad. They were already separated. She was crying, and I could only hear her talking about my dad's infidelity. I found out in the worst possible way, and it was even worse because his lover was my teacher who helped me with my bad grades. It was the worst way to find out about something like that. Story 30. I overheard my dad cheating on my mom, and then I heard the whole argument when she found out. In the end, she forgave him, but I can never forgive it, and I couldn't say anything because I was supposed to be asleep. What about you? What's the worst thing you've heard pretending to be asleep?